some cool stuff going on for sure. A huge hallmark of the original track is the vocal effect. The like warbly, watery vocal effect. You can find it, you can hear it. I think it is across all the vocals for the whole song, and it's like kind of the defining factor. When Eyal first approached me about mixing this track and I listened to the original, that's the first thing I thought of. I was like, okay, we're going to have to pay homage to that, but do it and find something like cool and unique. It was a little scary actually going into the mix, because anytime you're like, all right, I just got to find something really cool and unique. I mean, sometimes that doesn't always happen. And honestly, like truthfully, this effect isn't like that unique. It's pretty close to what they did. I definitely took inspiration from that original pretty hard with like some filtering, some distortion. It definitely was a good amount of experimentation. But I guess let's talk about how I achieved that. Anytime I have like a standout vocal effect that's specifically one that's going to take stacking multiple effects on top of one another to kind of create a unique sound, I'll typically find my vocal sound for the song first, and then once that's there, I'll bounce the section out and then just build a chain for that section. You can see it right here. It's called Underwater Verses. If I just mute this and unmute these, I'm just back to my stock vocal sound for the rest of the song. And then once I have that, I render it down to a stereo file, pop it up here under a new folder just to keep things organized. And then I just build what I want. And it allows me that I have a track that's just running those effects live all the time, and I can reuse them. I think in this case, I did mute the reverb and delays that I have on the vocals all the time, just because I knew it was going to be a pretty heavy-handed set. So yeah, I don't think you guys are getting that on the DW feed, but that's just a dry but processed vocal sound that is like a nice clean palette for me to build a top of. And how did we accomplish that? So stacking a bunch of stuff. Some Saturn, just adding some grit, mainly up top. So I split these. They both have distortion happening, but more so above about 500 hertz. You can hear the saturation there, almost like a broken speaker. And then we add some filtering. So it's just like a subdued kind of radio thing that's not too small. Some micro shift chorus to kind of widen it out and give it a little bit of a warble. We're starting to add some of the modulation style things. And then probably honestly really the main heavy lifter of this is a plugin that I don't know that I've ever used before. But I was just hunting for something that was going to kind of give me the warble that I was after. And this rotary speaker emulation kind of did it. It's got some cool stuff, like some built-in drive and things like that. Honestly, like I haven't the slightest clue like what half of this shit does. I just pulled it open. I was like, I think this is going to get me there. And I started playing with it. So the mix is down on this a little bit too. But it's just like a whirly emulation, something you might use on an organ or a guitar, something like that. But it gave me a cool vibe here, and then I think I'm just sculpting a bit more. I think some of the drive emulation in that whirly type plugin added some annoying upper mids that I'm controlling here. And this happens fast, you know, like this doesn't have to be super precise. It's just a specific effect. So if this were like a guitar track, like I may try and like trim this down a bit, and some of these EQ points, there's not really much here. I may have just like tried to work some of that into the first one, or like been a little more precise with some of the moves. But it's just not about that at this point of the mix. It's just about finding the vibe fast, so you can keep the like creative juices flowing. So it's kind of rough and dirty. Like often these chains that I'm building towards the end of a mix process won't be the cleanest, and I'm just like throwing shit at it, just like dumping sauce until it gets to the right level of sauce. And then we're adding some verb and delay back. So I have these on the mix bus as well, the same ones actually, maybe slightly different ratios. But since I knew I was going to be pretty heavy-handed, I didn't want to necessarily send a bunch of reverb and delay through like the Saturn distortion, for example. So I bypassed that before the bounce, and then built my effects chain on top. And then when we get to verse 2, we have these talking bits that go in between the main verse lines. And this is a classic example where like I started with underwater verses, was pretty happy with that, and I wanted this to feel a bit different. So I duplicated this track and then just made modifications. Again, I bounced the talking without effects and wanted a similar but different vibe. Let's see how we achieve that. I did add some de-essing before these because the S's were just a little more prevalent on the talking bits. A similar Saturn, it looks to be the same. Some of the stuff is going to be exactly the same. That looks to be the same. Yep. I think I added more microshift. Yeah, so slightly higher mix and added some detune on microshift. I'm just looking for a bit wider of a vibe here. So that way the interplay between the affected but screamed lines and the talking lines would feel a little bit different as far as like a width and spatially. The rotary stuff is probably similar. Actually, no. It's a lot less of it. The mix is a lot lower on the talking bits. Similar EQ here. And then I tacked on some flange that's nice and wide below. Just so it's obviously like a similar sound, but I just wanted it to be not exactly the same, so you kind of get a little bit of like a call and response. Let's hear that. Some automation happening on these as well. The main difference, a little bit less distortion coming from the rotary plugin, and then more width from the heavier mix of the chorus and the flange set nice and wide. And there's some delay throws, like on that last word on the talking line.
The winds of truth are blowing now.
All just kind of listening through the song and thinking about where those types of effects would sound cool. Kind of just like by feel, honestly. And then we shift into our full range vocal sound. So I knew I was going to want to kind of mix both topologies. I didn't want to only have like a heavily filtered affected vocal. Sean is just such a beast. You're going to want to hear his natural voice or more natural sounding voice at one point. And then you get some contrast between the verses and the kind of pre-choruses, choruses. But anytime you do that, you have to carefully manage the transition, because it can very easily sound weird to specifically go from a very filtered sound into a full range sound. It won't feel right. So there's a lot of back and forth of like, okay, how much do I want to filter the affected sound so it doesn't sound too strange when it goes into a full range vocal? And then I think I even went into the normal vocal bus, and yeah, like that's probably lower than I would typically low pass. But just because there's so many affected vocals, like I couldn't have this too bright and crispy or it just didn't really match. As far as the automation on these, I even did another cool thing where some of the delay throws, when we get into the full range vocals, actually, let's just solo the vocals and listen and I'll point it out.
Blowing now, and the cradle falls down. The burning dogma. Introducing to a mind.
So on some of the delay throws, I kind of copied over like a simplified version of the affected verses, but it's only on the delay throw. So I have a few, you can see my kind of effect sends I have set up over here. A half note delay, that's a stereo ping pong, a half note delay that's mono, and then this is like something that it wouldn't be typical for me in a project, which is a half note mono delay with effects, and it's like a broken down version of that verse. So again, it's just using a bit of that sound to tie it in. So you still get a full range main vocal sound, but then the delay throws like kind of like tie it to the verse effects. I was really stoked on how that came out. In like a subtle way, it just helps like blend the parts of the song together. Which, like I said, anytime you have like a really prominent affected section, it could just very easily feel out of place. So you got to sometimes do a lot to like make it sit in the song properly. So let's listen through these and watch some of the vocal automation on the vocal bus. And you can just kind of hear some of the delay throws and some of the tricks that we did to get everything to gel. Cool. So that's the main part of the interesting bits of the vocals anyway, those affected sections.